All right, guys, coming back at you here today, really quickly with some iOS dev tips. Today, I want to talk about animating constraints or animating anchors. A lot of people see me in videos using NS layout anchors or NS layout constraints programmatically, and I got some questions recently about how to animate them if I wanted to do some sort of animation. Some people are used to using storyboards, but today I'm going to show you how to do everything programmatically. So let's get started. Open up Xcode, new project. I will make a single view application, call this animating constraints. And what we'll do for the purposes of this video, as I do in all my videos, I'll go ahead and just remove the storyboard. Go into the project settings under main interface, remove the storyboard, go back into my app delegate. I'm going to use this window here that's already here. I will say window, which is already a variable, set this equal to a UI window. It's going to ask for a frame. I'm going to say UI screen.main.bounds. And then I'm going to say something called window make key visible, which makes that actual window visible. And I'm going to get a hold of my current view controller, let VC equal this view controller class that Apple's provided us here. I'm going to instantiate that, and then I'm going to call on my window root view controller. I'm going to assign my root view controller to that view controller I just made. If all goes well, I'm going to go ahead and run this. Going into my view controller, just going to remove this unneeded function, clean this up just a little bit. And today I want to show you guys how to animate these constraints. It's pretty simple to do. What we'll do is we'll just create a view on the screen and we'll animate it back and forth across the screen. As you can see right now, because we removed our storyboard, we don't have a background on this. I'll just say view.background color equal to white. That will fix that guy. Let's go ahead and create a view. I'll call this a red view for now. Of type UI view, which is equal to this closure. Say let view equal UI view. Return my view down here like that. And I'm going to set something called translate auto resizing masks to false. The reason I do this is because when we modify the constraints and add them in code, they're not going to render out correctly if we don't set that property. Set the background color of the view to red. And let's go ahead and just mark this private as well for now. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's have a button that we can press. We'll make a private button as well. We'll call this the animate button, I guess, because we're going to use this button to animate the view. We'll create it programmatically the exact same way we did our view. And we'll return our button. What is going on today? Return button like that. Okay, let's set a few different properties. Let's first set the title. We'll do set title. And we're not going to get any auto completion because of that. So now we should be able to call set title, yeah. We'll call it move view, I guess, for control state normal. Okay. Let's set a title color. Just set title color this one. We'll just make it black for now. Control state of normal. Let's set the constraints just like the auto resizing mask constraint. Translate auto resizing masks to false. Okay, and let's add a target. When we press this button, we want something to happen, right? So we need to add a target. And adding this target is crucial because if we press the button if we press the button and we don't have a target added, nothing will happen. I'm gonna say handle, we'll just call this function handle view animation. And we'll make this touch up inside. All right, looking pretty good. It's gonna complain for a second because I don't have a function called handle view animation. I'll go ahead and create that down here, make it private, and we'll say func handle view animation. Boom, now that error will go away. Okay, what's next? What do we need to do? All right, now the way I like to do this is I like to do all my view animation and view setup in something called a setup view function, which I'll usually load in my view load. For this purpose, we won't do that. We'll just set everything up directly here. It will be a little bit simpler. And the reason this is actually complaining, you'll see, is it's saying fix it, add Objective-C to expose this instant method to Objective-C. The reason being is because this is declared in a constant, which is a let, and it's not a lazy variable like this. There's no instance of Axion itself, so it needs to be exposed to Objective-C. So if you just go here and you go at Object-C like that, that will that should get rid of that error actually. And what am I doing? Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It goes in front of the access modifier like that, right? This should go away now. We should be good. Dun, 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 dun. What is wrong? Oh, and in that I removed that as I noticed. Okay, so that will go away. Perfect. So that's all set up. We're ready to go ahead and add some stuff in. First, let's just add all this button and this red view actually into our view. So we'll just call self.view. I'm sorry, we'll just call actually just view add subview, and we'll say red view and view add subview. We'll just say animate button, right? Okay, so those are the first steps. The first step is when you add constraints into a view programmatically, we want to add the objects into the view like that, right? Okay. Next, we want to set up constraint anchors on the objects. So we need to do something like this. We need to say red view, and then there's all these different anchors that we can use. Anchors are probably the simplest to use in my opinion, that we can assign them out to. So I could be like center X anchor, for example, is constraint, and constraint is equal to another anchor, and I can say like self dot view here, center X anchor, and then I can set that active, and that would be an actual constraint. For the purposes of this and the way when I actually just set up static views, I'll just do it that way. But for something like this, we're going to be animating it, so we need to actually set up a variable that we can actually modify. And if I set, for example, the constraints down here just equal to themselves, which would be just like, for example, red view, like I showed you, dot center X anchor, right, dot constraint is equal to self dot view dot center X anchor, right, dot is, I would say is active here, right, equal to true. Well, I can't do this because if I come down here and want to move them, so I want to animate this constraint, right, down here in this handle view animation, I have no way of accessing this because once this anchor is set true, I can't modify it unless I set it false, but I can't access, like I can't say like red view dot center X anchor dot is active. So you notice I can't reassign the basically activity of it. I can't reassign it. So I need to do something where I declare some sort of constant outside of it. So let's just, I use basically variables that I'll assign outside. So for example, like we'll just call this the center X anchor, right? And it's of a type of NS layout constraint, and I'll just set it like that as an optional. And then what I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll say center X anchor equal to this red view anchor, and then I'll remove this guy, and then I'll say center X view anchor is active equal to true. So that then when I come down here, I can actually deactivate it. So you'll notice now that I have this property on this, which is active, and I can set it to false to deactivate it and then move it. So that's just kind of the way I do it. So I like to actually do it for all of them. So var.center y anchor, and this is of type NS layout constraint, and then so I do it pretty much for all the anchors, just because it's nice to have them all readily accessible. Now we won't use all these today, but I'm just going to show you how it would be. Anchor, so that right, yeah. Right. anchor. It's a little bit of typing, but honestly, once you get used to it, it's just very quick. Anchor. And this would be the same way if you're doing it from a storyboard. You'd have to create constants to these constraints from the storyboard, drag the outlet over, and then modify the constraint, because you can actually modify these. There's a property on these interlayer constraints called constant that you can move around. There's actually a few. There's a multiplier you can change, relation. Here's that is active, which is just a Boolean which activates it. This is probably the NSLayout constraint class. Okay, so so I've got the center X one, right? And next we want to do the top anchor. So we'll just say top anchor is equal to the red view, right? Dot top anchor, and we'll say constraints equal to self dot view dot top anchor, and we'll give it some padding. You can call this in here constant, which will set an offset from its anchor, and then we'll say top anchor is active equal to true. And then we'll do the height and width. So you always want to have like position in space where it is, where you want it to actually be positioned relatively on this view. So how far from the top, how far from the right, always the center, or wherever from the bottom. And then you want to have the size and the width, the size when you specify constraints. So we need to have a width on here. So I actually don't have those. I actually have to add them. So file private var, and you can use these to modify these constraints as well. Height anchor. That's the constraint. Okay. So now I'd say like height anchor. Oops. Red view. It's height anchor. It's set equal to this constant, and there's actually a instantiator on this, so we can use or initializer, and we'll just say we'll make it 100, and then we'll set the height anchor is active equal to true. Hope this is making sense. If not, leave me a comment. I know anchors and constant or constraints can be really, really confusing sometimes, but the more you do of it, honestly, the easier they become. Okay, awesome. So this is the red view. It's constraints. Now I'll do the opposite on the button because we're not going to modify or change the button. So I'll just say this is the animate. This will be the button. And so it's actually kind of easier. You just say animate button. We'll just put this directly in the center. Center X anchor dot constraint equal to self dot view dot center X anchor, and you just call it as active. So you're not assigning this to anything. This is just activating it directly on itself. So center Y and center X, if you set those equal to the view or whatever the super view is, it will just completely center it. So like that. And then we need a height and a width on this, but you actually don't. So because buttons are intrinsically sized, so when you create a button, right, it's sized to the width and height of the text that you put it in. So if I had to declare the font size larger, it'd be a lot larger. But it will actually auto intrinsically size. So if we run this now, let's see what we get. We should be able to get something in our view. Yep. So we got a button that nothing happens when we press it, and we've got a view that doesn't move. So how do we do that? So it's actually pretty simple. The formula really ends up being the formula for moving with constraints is what you want to move and where you want to move it. So what you want to move and where you want to move it. So that being said, the first thing you want to do, let's say I want to move this all the way over to the right when I press the button. Okay, that's pretty easy. Well, I know I want to affect this right views anchor, right? Okay. Well, when I instantiated it in the view, I didn't set the right anchor. Uh-oh, what do I do? Okay, well, something to kind of understand and learn is the center X and the center Y are synonymous with I guess you can think of it as the center X would be synonymous with almost like moving things right or left, and the center Y, which is this one, would be top and bottom. So I can reassign any of these really to the top or the bottom if I was moving it up or down or left or right to the right or left, the center X. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is drop our current center X, because that's right and left anchor. So how do we do that? So because we've created these constraints up here, these kind of easily accessible ones, I can just actually just call directly center X anchor. Oops. Center X anchor is active, false, like that. And that completely deactivates it. So for example, if I deactivated it in code right now while I was running it, it would not snap over here. It would just kind of just sit or move over. So how do I want to track? I need an actually variable here that I'm going to use to track basically if something is moved or if it's not. So I'm going to call this is moved from position. And we'll make this a Boolean. And since on load, we're going to set it equal to false because it really hasn't moved. You know, this would be when this file is actually loaded. Has it been moved? Has it not? So when the view loads, it loads this. It sets it default to false because nothing has happened, presumably. And then if I press the button, we'll iterate over if this is moved or not. So once we do that, we want to basically say let updated constraints. We want to reassign it to something, right? Constraint equal NS layout constraint. Okay, well, what does it equal? That's the question mark, right? Well, it's simple. It equals the value of is it moved from position already? If yes, well, we want to move it back. Let's move it back here. So that's easy. We'll just basically snap it back to where we were. So we can say something like red view dot center X anchor constraint equal to that one. We'll say self.view dot center X anchor. Okay. Okay, if it's false, well, we want to move it. So what do we want to do? We want to move the red view's right anchor, right? And then we want to constrain it equal to the self.views, sorry, views dot right anchor, right? Okay, like that. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to assign our center X anchor equal to our updated constraint, right? Depending on which way we're going. And then we want to activate our constraint is active equal true. Okay, so if I run this code right now, it's not going to run. And that's because to animate the movement or change, we need to call an animation block. And we're going to use uiview.animate, uiview.animate with duration. Let's use this one with initial spring dampening and spring velocity. So we'll say a delay or a with duration of 3, with delay of 0, with spring dampening of 1, initial spring velocity of 1. We'll say curve ease out for this, and you can really use any of the animation options. In here, we need to call something called self.view.layout, oops, if needed. And this forces the layout change if it's needed, basically. We don't need a completion. And we want to change our status on our Boolean once ran. So we need to say whatever our status is of is moved from position, well, we want it to equal the opposite of is moved from position. So if it's false, it will be true. If it's true, if it's false. So if I run this right now and I press the button, you'll see what happened. It will basically slide over and then slide back. So it slides over, hugs the side, slides back. Slides over, slides back. Okay, great. How do we get into some more fun animations? Okay, well, what we can do is we can actually do a lot of things with this value. So we can say, if this value is true, we can do, this slide animation, and we can also do another really cool animation. So let's do something called a transform. I like transforms a lot because they make things grow, they make things rotate, they make things scale. So we'll do a transform here, which will be kind of fun. And we'll just call the UI view animation, same block. We'll call a simpler one with no spring velocity or anything. And we'll make this, I guess, the same speed. Actually, let's make this both 0.5, just so it's a little bit longer. Kind of, you can see a little bit better. And let's do something in here. Okay, well, what do we want to do? So there are these animations called transforms. And if I call self.redView, right, that's the object or the view that we want to inflict the transform, and say transform, we can use something called a CG affine transform. And we can set it equal to a CG affine transform. And there's an initializer on this, which is really, really cool. There's a few. There's scale X and scale Y, right? That will grow it and shrink it, or grow it rather, X and Y, and I can set those values in floats. There's a rotate option where I can rotate the entire object. There's a translation, which will move it physically in the physical space. If we do this, though, and I say 10 and 10, watch what happens when I run this. It's actually kind of cool. This will scale the view, the number of times that you have in here. So this would be 10 times. So boom, look at that. Isn't that cool? So it slides over to the right and then it grows. And it grew 10 times. Now it's outside the bounds of this window, for example, but really, really cool. Now if I press it, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to go back. But I can actually do something kind of neat here with that value I told you about earlier. I can say if self.is moved from position, okay? Well, that would be that it's true. Okay, so it's already been moved. So we want to do something in here. And that would basically be meaning that this is already looking like this. We want to put it back, right? So how do we do that? Well, self.redView, right, dot transform equal to something. Well, there's a property on a CG affine, which is called identity. And the identity, I actually don't know if they specify in here what it is, but I'll tell you that basically it will return it back to its original shape and size that it originally was before it happened. And then if I just provide this simple else here, block, right? This will ensure that if it hasn't moved from its position, then it will grow. If it has, then it will shrink. Let's try that. So it grows. It should shrink back, yeah. So now it's not sliding back over to the right when it shrinks. You notice that, but it's going back in. Now, if we wanted to slide it back over and shrink it, what we would do is we would basically, in this block here, or I'm sorry, in this identity block before it, we would simply just run this back. The same, we'd animate these and run this animation block. And that would scale it back over and then shrink it back at the same time. Okay, so I hope that this this has been helpful and this has been interesting. We talked about NS layout constraints and layout anchors. We talked about animating NS layout constraints and anchors. Now you can do this on anything because anything that's a view inherits from NS layout constraints, which can be actually used. So hopefully this helps, guys. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will try to post this code up on GitHub. And until then, have a great